Hello, here's an advert from the famous Nespresso coffee brand.
Coffee?
It has been airing since November 15th, 2022 on various audiovisual channels on television and on social media on the internet. The ad shows a fierce and highly amusing battle between several actors. It features three famous actors, Camille Cottin, Georges Clooney, and Jean Dujardin. The film was shot in a Haussmann building, with the city of Paris and the Eiffel Tower in the background. The director is American Grant Reslov. This ad has very little dialogue, but it's very expressive. What makes it so easy for us to understand what's going on? I suggest you analyze the non-verbal language of this video using the body systemics method.
Don't forget to recycle.
Camille?
Jean?
Unbelievable.
Unforgettable.
Nespresso. What else?
From the original video, we'll analyze the actor's non-verbal language. When specific configurations appear, they are isolated in order to investigate their meaning. Where this provides a better understanding, we'll slow down the process to make it easier to identify certain configurations. Our database can be used to indicate the direction of the configurations observed. Now that we have the meanings of the configurations, we can best interpret them with the help of context. When Georges Clooney opens the door, Jean Dujardin has both his eyebrows raised in a characteristic arc of pride. He's also happy to be there as he smiles. And he's doing a left side plane with his head, which means his head is tilted to the left.
George?
In this image on the right, you can see that the eyebrows are lowered into a neutral configuration. We have a point of comparison between the two images. Keep the notion of comparison in mind, as it is a great help in identifying the appearance or disappearance of a configuration.
George? Jean? Coffee?
Georges Clooney has the corners of his mouth and the lower slits of his eyes turned upwards, which means he's really smiling. He's enjoying seeing Jean Dujardin. Georges Clooney also does a lateral right plane, which at the same time expresses a certain incomprehension at Jean Dujardin's arrival.
Jean?
Georges Clooney lowers his head, what we call an inferior sagittal plane, and at the same time cuts his gaze with Jean Dujardin, showing that he's uncomfortable with Jean Dujardin's arrival.
Jean?
Georges Clooney's face is sagging. He feels powerless in this situation.
Coffee? What else?
Jean Dujardin's lower mouth on the left-hand side descends, a configuration found when there is a personal fear. Given the context, Jean Dujardin probably felt this fear because he had a personal apprehension during filming. Only he himself could tell us whether he was afraid of the quality of his acting, of the fall he had to take afterwards, or for some other reason.
What else?
Here's a video excerpt from another source, showing a sequence of George Clooney with his wife, his entire lower lip descending downwards. It's an interesting sequence, as it shows the dynamics of movement as the lip descends. Both sides of his lip are moving downwards. We're looking at the configuration that expresses fear. The muscle that pulls the lip down is called the platysma, and is located in the neck. At this moment, Georges Clooney is feeling fear. What's deceptive is that at this moment, the rest of his face seems neutral. If we don't know the meaning of the lower lip dropping, we might think, as usual, Georges Clooney is very comfortable. He's in control of the situation, even of his emotions, but we realize that, despite the control of his face, he's just like everyone else. And an emotion of fear can overwhelm him when you see the world around him, the noise, the flashbulbs. It's an understandable reaction.
However, the admiration didn't last long.
Georges Clooney uses two parts of his face to make a familiar combination. He closes his eyes while raising his eyebrows, a combination that expresses contempt. Given the context, Georges Clooney is probably feeling contempt for Jean Dujardin. He anticipates the fight for coffee that will follow.
Coffee? What else?
When Jean says what else, Georges smiles and makes an acquiescent noise. He's proud that Jean has recognized him through this well-known phrase. And this in turn makes Jean Dujardin proud, as he raises his eyebrows in a circular arc and expresses pride once again. Verbally, the what else lasts a long time.
Coffee? What else?
Georges Clooney's eyebrows are furrowed in incomprehension, as he wonders if there's still a capsule or if it's going to come out of the case. Jean Dujardin pulls outwards on the corners of his mouth, expressing contempt. At this moment, Jean Dujardin has contempt for Georges Clooney, and the context leads us to interpret this as anticipating the fight for the last coffee capsule. You'll notice that this configuration is not a smile. The corners of the mouth are drawn in, but they don't go up. At eye level, there's no smile. The lower palpebral slits don't go up. George Clooney pulls the left corner of his mouth to the left, which is the configuration signifying spite, probably because he's thinking to bad Jean. You won't be able to have any coffee because I've got the last capsule. He then pulls on both sides of his mouth, which conveys a polite smile. We can see that he's embarrassed by this situation. He then raises his eyebrows at Jean Dujardin, as if to say, you see the situation too. The palpebral slits go back down, indicating that Georges Clooney is feeling negative at this moment. Jean Dujardin kisses himself. Jean Dujardin's lips move forward, as if to kiss. It's done when a person feels narcissistic. In this context, we could interpret it as you'll see Georges, I'm the best. I'm the one who'll get the last capsule. Georges Clooney's mouth is contracted as a result of the tension he is experiencing following Jean Dujardin's previous action. The right eyebrow on its outer part rises. Observe specifically the distance between the eyebrow and the eye to identify it. At this moment, Georges Clooney expresses contempt for Jean Dujardin. He plays his role from the bottom of his heart. Georges Clooney's palpebral fissures are drooping, which in turn makes the whites of his eyes appear more clearly. This drooping is a negative emotion, and he's angry at Jean Dujardin. Georges Clooney contracts the muscle around his eyes, a configuration visible when a person feels anger. It tells Jean Dujardin that he's angry and doesn't like what's going on. He wants his coffee. Georges Clooney also does a right rotating plane, looking at Jean Dujardin with his right eye. He's distrustful, distancing himself. Jean Dujardin logically offers the same configuration, also looking with his right eye, which is understandable given the fierce struggle. Camille Cottin should be surprised by the noise, yet she expresses a rather neutral face. This gives the impression of a discrepancy between the emotion expected and the emotion expressed. George Clooney's face is tense, particularly the inner part of his eyebrows, which are raised. He's expressing fear and suffering. Jean Dujardin has the corners of his mouth turned down, expressing sadness at the loss of the capsule in this plan. George Clooney's facial expression indicates that he is more affected than Jean Dujardin. Jean Dujardin is always to the right of Georges, a recurring motif. Jean Dujardin's tightened lips, drooping eyebrows, and protruding cheekbones indicate the configuration of suffering. Given the context, pulling on a rope to bring a person up involves a great painful effort. The emotion displayed is in tune with the context. George Clooney's downturned eyebrows show that he's in a state of incomprehension, and his gaze indicates where this incomprehension lies: the unexpected presence of a large cup of coffee. George's Clooney's eyebrows go up, the whites of his eyes appear on the upper part, and his mouth is open. All this is the configuration of surprise, given the context. George's Clooney didn't expect to find anything other than a capsule. He was therefore surprised to see a large, ready-made cup of coffee. Camille Cottin seems to be expressing a rather neutral face, but in fact, she's looking sideways at the spot where she'd left her cup, a look that conveys distrust. Jean Dujardin and George's Clooney have wrinkled eye rims, raised palpebral slits, and raised corners of the mouth. They express the configuration of sincere smiles. Just after someone rings the doorbell, George's Clooney's face, mouth corners, and palpebral slits drop downwards. George's Clooney bows his head in embarrassment at the arrival of his downstairs neighbor Camille. Cottin, his palpebral slits have descended, revealing the whites of his eyes, a dynamic that reflects a negative emotion. George's Clooney pulls on the left corner of his mouth. This is the configuration of spite. He's disappointed because his neighbor has just taken back what he'd previously taken from her. He no longer feels ashamed as his head rises to a horizontal plane. The lower palpebral slits are raised, and the whites under the eyes are much reduced. Camille Cottin does a left lateral plan, looking at George's Clooney with her right eye. Camille Cottin is thus relaxed, while at the same time distancing herself from George's Clooney. After being robbed of her coffee, she offers him a capsule, but remains understandably wary. She raises her eyebrows to insist on recycling the capsules. Her head tilts in the same direction as the capsule, showing that she likes the coffee, whereas if her head had tilted the other way, it would have shown that she doesn't like the capsule.
Don't forget to recycle.
Jean Dujardin's palpebral slits are raised, and he's smiling at Camille Cottin. So Jean Dujardin enjoys seeing Camille Cottin. Jean Dujardin raises his eyebrows in an arch, a configuration that expresses pride. In Jean Dujardin's case, it appears on numerous occasions.
Camille?
Camille Cottin expresses a genuine smile when she sees Jean Dujardin. The corners of her mouth and lower palpebral slits turn up.
Camille?
Jean?
George's Clooney pulls on both sides of the mouth, but horizontally. The corners don't go up. This configuration expresses contempt for Camille Cottin. She comes to take his coffee back. You'll notice that at the same moment, George tilts his head to the right, which is an additional configuration indicating that the situation is negative.
Unbelievable.
Every time George's Clooney puts Jean Dujardin on his right, George's Clooney keeps Jean Dujardin in the right field of vision. George's Clooney wants to keep control of the relationship. On several occasions, Jean Dujardin is on George's Clooney's left. But this is linked to the layout of the coffee machine, which imposes certain positions, or when Jean Dujardin arrives from the rear and chooses which way to go. The actors in this ad have a very rich nonverbal language, expressing numerous emotions that we were able to identify according to the configurations displayed. The video lasts 60 seconds, and we've only selected around 30 configurations. The video is rich. And the director has filmed and staged this ad very well. The actors are well cast in the roles they're playing. But there are also other configurations appearing in parallel, because even though the actors are acting, they have thoughts and other emotions running through them at the same time. The more an actor puts himself into the role, the more his body will express the configuration, the associated emotion. Now, when you watch the commercial again in real time, you're guaranteed to identify more configurations and gain a deeper understanding. If you want to learn this method with the latest teaching tools, join us on the Training Center, on the sharing platform, and on the social networks linked below this video.